more difficult. And unfortunately, that is the record to date of this administration. I hope we can change that and start today by sending these trade agreements up to the Congress so that we can act on them and get these things approved and get American businesses exporting to these three countries. Mr. President, I yield the floor.
Without objection, the materials referred to by the Senator will be entered in the record, and the clerk will call.
Mr. President, I suggest the absence of a quorum.
Clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Akaka.
President.
Senator from North Dakota.
I ask further proceedings on the quorum call be dispensed with.
Without objection.
Mr. President, we are now reaching a critical hour in the Congress of the United States on the question of extending the debt limit of the nation and of fundamentally dealing with the debt of the nation. I don't think there's any serious person in either body that does not understand that we must deal with the debt itself as we extend the debt limit. We are borrowing 40 cents of every dollar that we spend. The gross debt of the United States will reach 100% of our GDP by the end of this year. The best economists in the country, of whatever philosophical stripe, are telling us we are on an unsustainable course that must be changed. Mr. President, in the midst of this, we have had the House so far unable to send us a package. Now we're told they do have the votes because they have added a balanced budget to the Constitution as part of their package. Mr. President, the balanced budget that they have previously proposed in the House of Representatives can never pass the United States Senate, at least as this body is currently constituted. And it should not pass this body. It is deeply flawed. And to attach that to a measure that has to pass both houses before Tuesday of next week, frankly, is an indication of a lack of seriousness on the part of our colleagues in the House of Representatives. Ultimately, there has to be a bipartisan agreement. Our friends in the other party control the House of Representatives. The Senate is controlled by my party, the Democratic Party. We have a Democrat in the White House. No serious person can fail to understand that putting an amendment to the Constitution of the United States that is deeply flawed into that package absolutely guarantees that it cannot pass in this chamber. That would take a two-thirds vote. I don't believe it would even command a simple majority here, much less a two-thirds vote. So here we are at the 11th hour, and people in the other body seemingly are still not serious about coping with the challenge of both extending the debt limit to avoid a default, which would be catastrophic, and of dealing with the debt itself. Mr. President, I understand ideological rigidity. The time for that is past. The time now is to work together in some reasonable way so that we advance legislation that both extends the debt limit to avoid the catastrophic consequences of a default and to deal with the debt threat itself. Mr. President, the New York Times on Wednesday had this story: on all levels of the economy, concern about the impasse. What they were talking about is the rating agencies saying, if we don't do both, if we don't extend the debt limit and deal effectively with the debt itself, they're going to downgrade the rating of our credit as a country. Mr. President, the story goes on to say economists and analysts are trying to gauge the cost to the economy and consumers if the United States loses its solid gold credit rating, a move that appears more likely now that the standoff in Washington over government spending has calcified. Some economists say the effects of lowering the federal government's credit rating to AA from AAA can be measured in the billions of dollars, in increased borrowing costs for the government, and in the billions more that consumers, corporations, states, and municipalities will have to pay for their credit. It also could erode consumer and business confidence, slowing even further the economy and job creation. Mr. President, it started already. We have just learned the latest numbers on economic growth. They were a tepid 1.3%. Mr. President, this uncertainty being created here by a failure to deal with our debt and with an extension of the debt limit are creating a headwind for our economy, reducing economic growth, slowing job creation, costing us a stronger recovery. Mr. President, I want to remind colleagues, for every 1 percentage point increase in interest rates, that adds $1.3 trillion to the debt. So kicking this can down the road, not facing up to it, has enormous consequences. $1.3 trillion added debt for every 1% increase in interest rates. This is just the effect on the federal government. Trillions more would be the effect on consumers, on companies, on other levels of government with an increase in interest rates. And Mr. President, when we see the proposal by the Speaker that apparently the House is now prepared to send us, it has fatal flaws. And here they are. First of all, it would repeat the default crisis in just 6 months. That would continue the uncertainty and put the economy at further risk. Our friends on the other side have repeatedly said how uncertainty is hurting this economy, and now they want to create themselves more uncertainty. Makes no sense. Mr. President, the Boehner Plan includes significantly less deficit reduction than does the Reid Plan. The Boehner Plan, as I understand it, have not been able to calculate his newest version fully. It was in the range of $1 trillion of savings. Majority Leader Reid's plan is well over $2 trillion of savings. Third, the Boehner Plan provides no firewall between security and non-security spending. That means even deeper cuts on the domestic side of the ledger, because we all know what happens if you don't have a firewall. And finally, it requires an irresponsible balanced budget approach that has been clearly rejected here and will be rejected again. That's certain. Mr. President, Standard & Poor's has warned against repeated debt ceiling debates. Here's what they said on July 26th. We would be concerned if we thought the debt ceiling debate would come back and be open and we'd have to go through all this again and again and again. That would be negative in our view. Mr. President, this is the rating agency that determines what the interest rates will be on the debt of our country, not directly, but indirectly. Because if they write down our credit worthiness, that will increase interest rates. So they're sending us a very clear signal. Don't do the Speaker Boehner plan that has only a 6-month extension and repeat this whole process and create more uncertainty and put the economy further at risk. To avoid a U.S. credit rating downgrade, the S&P wants to see a bipartisan debt reduction effort, not the totally partisan approach that Speaker Boehner has for the moment chosen to pursue. Mr. President, I don't know what could be more clear. The other body is in the control of our friends in the other party. This body is in control of Democrats. At the end of the day, we have to come together. We have to work together. Now, I've been part of two efforts to work together. Last year, the Fiscal Commission, 18 of us, given the responsibility to come up with a plan to get our debt under control. At the end of the day, 11 of the 18 agreed on a plan. 5 Democrats, 5 Republicans, and 1 independent. Fully bipartisan. I was proud to be part of the 11 that agreed to that plan. This year, I've been part of the group of 6, 3 Democrats, 3 Republicans, that were asked by about 30 of our colleagues to see if we could find a way to implement the findings of the Commission. Because for the Commission's findings to be implemented, they had to have a super majority. They had to have 14 of the 18 agree. And even though we had 11 of 18, it wasn't enough. So about 30 senators met at the beginning of this year, the end of last, and asked a group of us, 6, 3 Democrats, 3 Republicans, to see if we could come up with a bipartisan plan. We've worked all year, hundreds of hours, and we have agreed. We've laid out a plan for our colleagues. It is the only bipartisan plan before either chamber. Mr. President, Speaker Boehner, at this late hour, is still pursuing a plan only on the Republican side of the aisle, and only in one chamber. That can't possibly be a recipe for success. Mr. President, David Beers, Standard & Poor's global head of sovereign ratings, said this on July 26th. We will measure the deal on a number of parameters. One is it credible? And credibility, among other things, means to us there has to be some buy-in across the political divide, across both parties, because politics can and will change going forward. And if there's ownership by both sides of the program, then that would give us more confidence. It's not just about the number, it's about the all-in intent. Mr. President, are our colleagues listening? The solution cannot be found on just one side of the aisle in one chamber. This is going to require bipartisan, bicameral cooperation. We're going to have to act like adults, not by kids in the schoolyard pointing fingers, spreading rumors, spreading blame. That will not lead to success. Mr. President, here's the circumstance we face. The red line is the spending line of the United States going back 60 years. The green line is the revenue line of the United States going back 60 years. And what you can see, the revenue of the United States as a share of our national income is the lowest it has been in 60 years. Spending as a share of our national income is the highest it has been in 60 years. Revenue is the lowest, spending is the highest. That's why we have record deficits. Mr. President, clearly you have to work both sides of the equation to get a solution. Some of our friends on the other side are saying, don't touch revenue. Some of our friends on both sides are saying, and don't touch entitlements. Don't touch Medicare, don't touch Social Security, don't touch Medicaid. Now, Mr. President, if you can't touch revenue and you can't touch the entitlements, you can't solve the problem, by definition. When you're borrowing 40 cents of every dollar and you exclude all revenue, that's half the equation, and you exclude 60% of federal spending, if you eliminated all the rest of federal spending, every dime for defense, for non-defense discretionary, if you eliminated every dime, you wouldn't solve the problem. Now, Mr. President, At some point here, we've got to get serious and real with the American people. The balanced budget amendment that our colleagues in the House sent us previously, that's already been rejected here once, now they're putting in the package to send us here again at the 11th hour, a balanced budget amendment that is as deeply flawed as any amendment that I have seen in 25 years in this chamber. Let me review what our friends on the other side sent us in a balanced budget amendment that was rejected here just in the last few weeks. It would restrict the ability to respond to economic downturns, meaning you would compound the decline. That's bad economics, and it's not going to pass. Number two, it uses Social Security funds to calculate balance and subjects that program to the same cuts as other federal spending, even though Social Security has its own trust fund and is separately funded. Number three, it shifts the ultimate decisions on budgeting to unelected and unaccountable judges. And fourth, it requires a state ratification process that could take years to complete. We don't have years to wait for a state ratification process for a constitutional amendment. We need to make these spending and revenue decisions ourselves and do it now. It's our responsibility. Let's not be waiting for the states to ratify a constitutional amendment before we take the action that is necessary. Mr. President, the balanced budget amendment that the House previously sent us has the risk of turning a recession into a depression. Why do I say that? Because there is no provision in the amendment that they sent us for an economic downturn as being an exemption from the balanced budget requirement. That is Hoover economics all over again. How many times do we have to learn the harsh lesson that when we are in an economic freefall, the only entity big enough to pull us out is the collective organization of our government? That is the only place that has the muscle to prevent a recession from turning into a depression. And the balanced budget amendment our colleagues sent us before would absolutely lock down the federal government's ability to respond. That would be a profound mistake and contradict all we have learned in economics since the Great Depression. This is what Norman Ornstein, a scholar at the American Enterprise Institute, said about this constitutional amendment. He called it a, quote, really dumb idea. This is what he said: "Few ideas are more seductive on the surface and more destructive in reality than a balanced budget amendment. Here's why. Nearly all of our states have balanced budget requirements. That means when the economy slows, states are forced to raise taxes or slash spending at just the wrong time, providing a fiscal drag when what is needed is counter-cyclical policy to stimulate the economy. In fact, the fiscal drag from the states in 2009 and 2010 was barely countered by the federal stimulus plan. That meant the federal stimulus provided was nowhere near what was needed, but far better than doing nothing. Now imagine that scenario with a federal drag instead." Mr. President, the Washington Post wrote an editorial about the House balanced budget amendment, headlined, "A Bad Idea Returns. Rewriting the Constitution is the wrong way to deal with the debt." Here's what they said in their editorial: "Worse yet, The latest version would impose an absolute cap on spending as a share of the economy. It would prevent federal expenditures from exceeding 18% of the gross domestic product in any year. Most unfortunately, the amendment lacks a clause letting the government exceed that limit to strengthen a struggling economy. No matter how shaky the State of the Union, policymakers would be prevented from adopting emergency spending such as the extension of unemployment insurance and other countercyclical expenses that have helped cushion the blow of the current economic downturn. Mr. President, it doesn't stop there. This is what Senator McCain said on the Republican balanced budget amendment proposal on July 27th. What is amazing about this, some members are believing we can pass a balanced budget amendment to the Constitution in this body with its present representation, and that is foolish. That is worse than foolish. That is deceiving many of our constituents. That is not fair to the American people to hold out and say, we will not agree to raising the debt limit until we pass a balanced budget amendment to the Constitution. It is unfair. It is bizarro. Maybe some people who have only been in this body for 6 or 7 months or so believe that. Others know better. It is time we listen to the markets. It's time we listen to our constituents. Most of all, it's time we listen to the American people and sit down and seriously negotiate something. Senator McCain had it exactly right. Sending us a deeply flawed, balanced budget amendment to the Constitution of the United States at the 11th hour is not designed to achieve a result. It is designed to achieve a headline, a bumper sticker slogan that will not help us solve the problem. Mr. President, here's what a top economic advisor to former President Reagan said about the House balanced budget amendment. He said, and I quote, this is Bruce Bartlett, a former Reagan administration top economic advisor. And I quote him, I have previously explained the idiocy of right-wing advocates of a balanced budget amendment. However, the new Republican balanced budget proposal is especially dim-witted. In short, this is quite possibly the stupidest constitutional amendment I think I have ever seen. It looks like it was drafted by a couple of interns on the back of a napkin. Every senator co-sponsoring this balanced budget amendment should be ashamed of themselves. That is from a former top economic advisor to Ronald Reagan. Is anybody listening? Is anybody paying attention to how far off base things have slipped in the other body to send us at this moment, at this critical juncture, a plan that has absolutely no chance of passing in this body and should not? Mr. President, what is so deeply flawed? In addition to the other points I've made, the balanced budget amendment that the House Republicans sent us earlier set a spending cap of 18% of GDP. Well, let's add up what that would mean. You can see here Social Security is the red band. That's about 5% of GDP. If you add defense and all other non-health care spending, that takes you up to about 16.5% of GDP. Interest on the debt takes you to over 18% of GDP. You notice what's missing here? Medicare. In the Republican plan that they sent to us, with a spending cap of 18% of GDP, if you fund Social Security, if you fund defense and other non-health spending, and you fund interest on the debt, there's no money left. There's no money for Medicare. There's no money for Medicaid. There's no money for any health care spending. Mr. President, that's what the House of Representatives sent us just in the last several weeks as a balanced budget amendment to the Constitution of the United States. When some of our side called it cut, cap, and kill Medicare, they weren't kidding. Because if you add it up, it doesn't add up. Mr. President, not only that, the balanced budget amendment our colleagues in the House sent us just in the last few weeks also said it would take a two-thirds vote to get any additional revenue, even though revenue is the lowest it has been in 60 years. They would apply a two-thirds requirement to get more revenue. Really? So they would protect, with a two-thirds vote requirement, every tax scam, every offshore tax haven, every abusive tax shelter that's currently being used by some to avoid and evade the taxes they owe our country. I've shown this picture on the floor of the Senate many times. This is a little building down in the Cayman Islands, little five-story building that claims to be home to 18,857 companies. They all say this is their business headquarters. I've said that's the most efficient building in the world. Little five-story building down there, and it's the headquarters of 18,000 companies. Anybody believe that? Anybody believe that 18,000 companies are operating out of that little building down in the Cayman Islands? They're not operating their businesses out of there. They are engaged in a giant tax scam to make all the rest of us pick up their responsibilities. All of us who pay what we owe are getting stuck by the companies that are hiding out in this little building down in the Cayman Islands, avoiding the taxes that they owe our country. Because there are no taxes down in the Cayman Islands. So they operate out of this little building down there, five-story building, 18,000 companies. And they avoid paying the taxes that they owe and stick all the rest of us with the responsibility. That's not right. And the constitutional amendment that our colleagues in the House of Representatives sent us would protect that behind a wall of a two-thirds vote, which means you'd have an impossible time ever fixing this problem. It's hard to get a 60% vote around here, much less two-thirds. They would protect every offshore tax haven, every abusive tax shelter, every unfair tax preference that's in the current code, because they would require a two-thirds vote to change it. Mr. President, that flawed amendment is not going to pass the United States Senate. Not now, not later this year, not next year, because it itself would require a two-thirds vote. It is not going to happen. So I'd say to our colleagues in the other chamber, sending us a totally partisan approach with a deeply flawed constitutional amendment is not going to work. It is not going to help solve the problem. And now is the time for us to join in a serious dialogue about solving the problem, solving the debt threat overhanging the country, which will require not a $1 trillion package, as is in the House offering, but a $4 trillion package. The occupant of the chair well knows of what I speak. He was governor of West Virginia, and he dealt with a fiscal crisis in his state, and he guided his state through that crisis. not by operating just on one side of the aisle, but by working together with people on both sides to come up with solutions. Not political slogans. We are way beyond that. We are within days of a default on the debt of the United States that would have catastrophic consequences for the economy of our country. It's time. It's time, colleagues, to come together to do something that can pass, to deal, yes, with the debt limit, but also to deal with the debt itself. It will be an empty gesture if we just extend the debt limit and we don't deal with the debt itself. Now, our leader, to his credit, has put something together that begins to take ideas from both sides of the aisle to try to resolve this crisis. It would save the nation from an immediate economic crisis. It would provide a significant down payment on deficit reduction, more than $2 trillion, and it would put in place a special joint congressional committee, equally divided, Democrats and Republicans, to find additional savings. And there is no new revenue in the plan. Our friends on the other side have thus far said, at least in the House of Representatives, they can accept no new revenue, none, not a penny. So our leader has said, okay, I don't like that, but if that's your line in the sand, for right now, we will accept it so that we can find a solution that both sides can support. No new revenue, more than $1 trillion, more than $2 trillion of spending cuts, and a special joint committee to come up with a plan to achieve even greater savings. That's a pretty good offer to the other side to say, we hear you, we want to work with you, because we need a solution. Mr. President, we're just days away from a true crisis, one that would be self-inflicted. Colleagues, let's not go there. Let's come together. We've shown we can do it in the past. We need to do it now. Not with blame, not with finger-pointing, but by saying, this is a time to join together, to stand shoulder to shoulder, to prevent irreparable damage being done to our country. I ask my colleagues, now is the time. This day, we've got to find a way to come together. I thank the Chair and yield the floor. Note the absence